Welcome again to my DPC story. And thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here, Maria. Thank you.
With you guys coming back on a little over a year since your last interview, Jake and Christina's unable to join us today, but your daughter is past 1. Now she just turned 1 in September. And Lauren continues to have 3 amazing kids who are teenagers, and Deepti has another puppy in her life. And so life continues to happen as your DPCs are growing. So can you look back on this last year and give the audience a feel as to the theme of what has transpired over your year?
Ooh, yeah, I would definitely say this has been a year of growth. It's been a huge learning experience, and I've been really grateful for the practice because it's allowed us to have enough flexibility so that we can, if baby is sick or something and we need to rearrange the schedule, it's not this whole affair. We can literally just move the pieces really smoothly. And so that has been absolutely wonderful. If I had to put like a theme for the year, it would probably be either hospitality or team building. We've really, rebranded or changed we've renovated the actual practice as well as a little bit of the website to really make it clear that what we're trying to deliver is a really high touch, very accessible kind of care, and that we wanted to make hospitality that core theme. To do that, we've been building on the infrastructure that we had in previous years, where before it was about setting up video workflows for virtual assistants or those kinds of things. Now it's really about, okay, how do we bring on a team to be able to make sure that we're delivering the kind of care that we dream of our practice being. And so we did that in 2 ways. And we're extremely fortunate because this has been very much a process of hiring people. And so we have 2 just fantastic assistants that we've been working with. There's one that's virtual who functions as an operations assistant, and then one who's in the office who is a clinical assistant. And so that's been amazing because like our operations assistant is kind of working behind the scenes. She has a lot of hospitality experience in like non-healthcare fields. And that's been amazing because it's everything from chasing down records and third-party interactions, as well as helping patients when for some reason the pharmacy doesn't recognize that the prescription has been filled or whatever. She's really our bulldog for going after all of those things. And it really helps keep the patients in the loop for what's happening. And we actually, so I'll tell you a quick story of how we discovered her. So basically I was trying to fulfill like an online coffee order for my wife. And this was while she was pregnant. And she was the head barista there. And so I was going to fulfill that coffee order. And I put in just like what I thought I wanted, like blah, 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 espresso, it'll be fine. And then I get a call 30 seconds later. And she picks up the phone and she says, "Hey, I just wanted to be sure, I didn't want to step on your toes or anything, but I noticed that the drink your wife normally gets doesn't have this extra like espresso shot, whatever in it. Are you sure you want me to fulfill this order?" And I said, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much." And I just kind of filed that away in the back of my head because anybody with that much like work ethic and integrity, I definitely, if there's ever an opportunity, and one arose and I said, absolutely, we've got to have you on board. And the final thing that I'll say is a clinical assistant, basically that scribes, that greets the patients at the door, escorts them over to our suites, and processes labs, and also functions a little bit as a medical librarian. She's got a research background. So she does a little bit of research, like gives me briefs on everything, and then sends it over so that I can counsel patients and kind of give them a table of contents. Those things have really helped make sure that I can dedicate as much time as possible to the patient care. And that's because we've built up this like protocol for how things operate, and we evolved that over time. So we're incredibly lucky for that. And that's kind of been what our process has been about. So
exciting to hear that update. How about you, Deepti or Lauren?
I would say my theme has been adaptation, probably. So I have had to, and boundaries. I've grown significantly this year, and I have reached the capacity of what I can handle myself. I have decided that I'm going to add on another physician just because I had to take down my meet and greet request off my website because I couldn't tell people no. So removing the request was like the boundary I had to set. I couldn't like talk to people, get all of my feels, and then create a wait list and then tell them, no, I can't take care of you. And so I had to close that down. Adaptation with my kids too. So my oldest I agree with Jake that like the flexibility and the adaptation part, like we'll lose childcare for the day because somebody's sick, my nanny's sick or whatever. And my kids are now old enough that like I just bring them to the office and they run around, and my patients, like I just text them and I'm like, hey, twins are going to be here. And it's fine. And most of my patients, like most of the parents, like are excited to see my kids. They hear all about them all the time. I have dabbled with the idea of adding either like a staff person, like, I don't know, like doing a VA or something like that. But I've never pulled the trigger. I'm just not good at handing those things off, but it's been great. Like I'm done seeing patients for the day. Yeah, it's just friggin' sweet.
And just to put some context to that, it's only 9:40 Pacific. And so when Lauren's done for the day, she's done for the day in the morning. So it's incredible.
Yeah, I finished with 11:15 this morning, my time, Central Time. Like I saw 4 patients and I diagnosed, let's see, a quick hand, foot, and mouth, parvo, a well check, and then a tongue tie and revision, and I'm done.
That's awesome, because it almost sounds like you got your boundaries.
I finally did. Yeah, it was, I had to remove access from non-patients because I'm full, but I have, I think 8 babies coming in October and all siblings, because I've now been open long enough that my new babies now have little babies coming. So it's just great. And I would love to have another doc too, mainly because the one thing that I have missed is the ability to be like, hey, I saw what do you think? And like, I was going to go ahead and do this. Like, does that sound okay? And
yeah, definitely.
So with me, the way I started the whole My Happy Doctor journey was pretty much at my lowest point, where I just felt like, why did I choose to be a doctor if this is how life feels like being in the insurance model? And that was just 6 months where I almost felt like my safety at work was threatened because of some abusive situations where patients were demanding for certain medicines that I shouldn't have been giving them. So it went from being like this super low to then having the dream of My Happy Doctor evolve over like a couple of months and then actually start it. And then there was so much evolution in the way I interacted with patients, because there's that initial like wonder, am I doing this right? Am I saying the right things during my meet and greet? Like, am I coming off as really needy, someone who really needs patients, right? And it was hard. And now eventually all that has kind of fallen in place. And I think I have achieved the My Happy Doctor position by the end of first year. And then once I started through the second year, I think it was more about making my happy place, because now I had that change in me that made me My Happy Doctor. But now I have to kind of set all the rest of my house call situation, my telemedicine, my workflow into this My Happy Place, where I don't get those anxious palpitations and stuff like, which were part of common experiences during the insurance model. Even residency, we kind of expect that just because we're going through a huge like learning, but having that happen during the insurance-based practice just seemed like a never-ending ordeal, which I'm happy to announce that there's no more palpitations happening, but it's still very important to keep revisiting and rethinking, I think, about what I envision my happy place to be, because it's very, you can see that I'm not growing to the point that I'm hiring staff. And that's my happy place, because I feel like what I envisioned for My Happy Doctor was truly a micro practice. And I think a lot of doctors worry about having to hire someone or having to, spend a lot in the beginning. And for me to be at my 2-year point, getting my income that I wanted, and just working on the tiny details that actually make a huge impact on my everyday, and seems like my happy place is what the focus is for the past year. And it just, every day is a new experience, and there's some bad experiences still, because now as a business person, it's hard to say no There's friends who just like text you, say, hey, can you tell me what this ear pain is about? And it's hard to navigate these things because they wouldn't have probably done that to you if you weren't a doctor, right? And so there are situations like that that take a little more out of you emotionally too. And it is a journey that is unique for everyone. And I'm glad that I've reached this spot that I'm at now.
And I'm sure, especially for those people who have been inspired by your guys' journeys, it's so wonderful to hear real life problems of a business owner and a physician in direct primary care, because it's not all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows for sure.
Yeah.
And when you guys are talking about boundaries, whether it be deciding to create a wait list, close a wait list, hiring staff, focus on creating an environment where you want to practice, how do you guys check in with yourselves to say like, oh, I got to reevaluate something because a boundary has been crossed, or I'm sensing that a boundary is about to be crossed?
I go by like, if I am starting to resent the thing that's happening, are my patients texting me after hours? Are they trying to text me on weekends? Like, are they calling about unnecessary things? Or like, do I feel like that I'm getting a lot of questions about this specific thing and I'm repeating myself over and over? So I just kind of check in with like, what is making me irritated? And then how can I fix that? So I will, in terms of boundaries, like if I'm getting, oh, hey, there's been this weird rash for the last 3 months. That is not a 9 p.m. text. That is definitely not a 9 p.m. call. And so then I send out monthly newsletters and I'm like, hey guys, reminder that I have a family too. I go to bed too. And there are some important things that I do want you to call me about, but make sure that it is an urgent need and something that can't wait until morning. If it can wait until morning, please wait until morning. Then families are amazing about, the response is always incredible because you do have such a good relationship with them, and families will even get on to me for replying after hours. Like, hey, stop it. Stop text me in the morning. And so I'm very lucky that my families are so great because they hold me accountable and hold my boundaries accountable when I don't, so I don't get burnout. And that was like the wait list thing. It was causing me anxiety that I had these people that wanted me to see them and I couldn't. So I was like, I cannot have a wait list because it is too stressful. So I just took it off. So yeah, it's mainly just going by, I'm a big gut person. And so going by my gut.
Yeah, I would say kind of in the same vein, okay, how do we know when a boundary may be crossed or is about to be crossed, and how to like set up a protocol for that? Oftentimes, if it's like somebody we're talking to, I wish there was some sort of protocol or algorithm that I could follow in terms of exactly how to determine if somebody is a best fit for the practice. It's very much a gut feeling. And I think that a lot of people can resonate with that. You just get on the phone and like, you really want to click and find your tribe and your people. I have found that in terms of interacting with patients, especially with things like how to contact me, usually I'll have like the same 2-minute thing that I will say at the end of every new patient appointment. And generally speaking, has relieved a lot of concerns and anxiety about how best to contact me, and all of like kind of late night texts and stuff as well. And so that's been kind of helpful and a little bit surprising as well. And then it's very much just kind of that constant reassessing of, am I feeling good about this relationship? I want it to be a positive one for you. I want this to be a relationship where we feel it's both jiving. And if it's not, then just having that upfront conversation saying, I feel like maybe we're not getting along here and I sense some frustration. Is there any truth to that? And being able to be open to that conversation, at least from my perspective, has allowed them to air any concerns that they might have whenever sparingly they happen. But at the same time, it also allows me to have a floor to kind of discuss some things that for a long-term relationship, I want to make sure are solid and maintained.
I feel like my overall experience is that since COVID, or maybe even before COVID, there's been this underlying anxiety that most patients have. And with the membership model, there's extra access. So you could just get sentences like, is everything wrong with me? Or something like that, which you could just oftentimes not realize what the patient might actually be getting at. So I kind of take a step back when I get such sentences. And I go, okay, so that sounds like overwhelm. It could be personal overwhelm or related to their health, but it helps to bring those boundaries in place at the time. So there was one patient who would complain about multiple things, which obviously they have a lot of symptoms and things have been missed in the past. So there is that concern that maybe this symptom is actually something really bad. So when they said this sentence about, is everything wrong with me, but there was nothing else, there was no other symptoms and nothing else mentioned on there, I went back to kind of politely, compassionately dissect into saying, hey, it does sound like that sentence particularly sounds like there's some sense of overwhelm about this. So can we set up an appointment? And so that particular person expected, based on how they were feeling, they almost expected to see me every week or every 2 weeks. But one time, that full conversation, dissecting everything, trying to get through all of those pieces of the puzzle and then reassuring the patient, went so long that they didn't even need me for 3 months after that. And so it does help to not let those moments just pass by and accumulate into something where you eventually may resent them and have conflicts, and it just doesn't help grow your own professional skills either. And so it just feels like the tests that I've had with the boundaries, where usually doctors, whenever they consider DPC, they go, oh my God, the patient is going to have access to me all the time. Now I look at it both ways. I feel like I got access to them too. And so that's always easier. When I start a new medicine, I'm like a little bit worried about kidney function and I want to retest again. I would rather they respond to my text right away in those situations. And so it just feels like a good balance. You just need to know where to compromise with some of the boundary related issues. And it's been 2 years and I feel like I don't ever get a text or email that sounds like it's extremely anxious and needs an immediate response on the weekend. I don't mind if they write on the weekend, because you never know, some people are so busy they just get the time to think about their health on the weekend. But I try to just screen really quick on the weekends to see if there's anything urgent that I need to get back to. But if it's not urgent and I have the time, I already read the email, I just schedule a response for Monday morning. So that way, I don't have to go through that all over again, but it doesn't promote this behavior of, she's free on the weekend and we can just go back and forth. So there was a very good example this morning. So the patient emailed me on the weekend, extremely non-urgent issue. I scheduled a response for 8 a.m. in the morning, and at 7:35, I get an email. Did you get my email, doc? And so I responded with, during the weekends, to avoid back and forth, because weekends are not working hours for me, I try to schedule. So you'll get your response in 3 minutes. And there you go. They got the response in 3 minutes, because it was 8 a.m. in whatever, by the time I'd responded to them. So it just helps a lot to get them to see your perspective, and down the road, they wouldn't fear abandonment or something crazy, which oftentimes it may seem very easy to judge your patients, but they've gone through, everyone's going through their own story. And overall, as long as we remain compassionate and just remind gently about the boundaries, it goes a long way to make a strong relationship.
Now, looking back on this last year, what would you guys say was your biggest win in each of your clinics?
I think the biggest win was seeing this. I'm sure Jake and Lauren have also experienced this, because the way DPC works is the word spreads and you don't have to do a ton of social media and ton of pounding the pavement all the time. So I've been getting a constant stream of requests for meet and greets or appointments and memberships, just because of people talking to each other about it, and the word of mouth and those reviews that people leave after they thank me. I just send them a quick, it's just about the timing where you ask for the review. I feel if you send it as a regular scheduled, hey, can you write a review for me after your appointment, generally doesn't trigger an immediate response of writing the review. Oftentimes it's when there's this amazing thing you did and there's, you're the best, thank you, and then you go, hey, if you don't mind, a lot of people don't know about this and I appreciate you, and if you don't write it, no problem. So that way they feel kind of this responsibility for the community and this sense of, I need to share this so that more people can benefit from it. And I'm seeing that, and that was my dream. I didn't ever want to have ads or like have to pay for those advertisements and social media boosting and on whatnot. I feel like the organic growth that has happened has just multiplied with time. But I'm very careful about the good fit part, like Jake mentioned, because the churn can be really high if it's not a good fit, and sometimes there's financial reasons that people stop the membership for, and that's totally understandable. But most times you want to avoid the fit being an issue down the road because you want to grow. You don't want to keep having churn.
Besides a newborn baby, and that's got to top everything. But for the practice, I would say that there were a couple of, I don't know, lagging indicators that we were starting to do things very right. And that was one of the things that gives me personally a lot of energy is being able to teach, having the time, having the luxury of being able to spend some time with, whether it's with patients and teaching at the bedside, or whether it's afterwards and just going through a chalk talk with a medical student on how these things work. Within the past year, we've had a couple of medical students on, and it's been really wonderful because it feels like I get to introduce DPC to people who are thinking about that kind of thing. And in addition to that, it also is kind of a measure that, yes, the workflows that we've put in place, the assistance, and all the things that we've built and wondered, was this actually going to work or not, has actually come to fruition enough that we can have that time. So whether it's teaching a medical student or whether it's just taking the team out for lunch or something like that, we've built this system where we can design the day as we see fit for our patients, for ourselves, and for us, and for me personally, like that autonomy, that a sense of control over exactly how the practice is run is really fulfilling, and it makes me very excited to get up and walk into the practice each day.
Fantastic. And Lauren?
I kind of like a bit of both of them. So teaching, like right before we started, I was sending my med student home. I have med students every month, and I love teaching. I won resident teacher of the year. I love teaching. So I get really excited when I have med students, and especially when they're like these little green, like third and fourth years. And it's just the sweetest. I would love to be able to get residents too. I didn't even go searching for med students. They found me, but that has been awesome. And the growth factor too has been great. And like it's just, I mean, I like doing social media. I think it's fun. My kids are obsessed with watching reels I've done. I think it's enjoyable, and it's not something I have to do. So I just do it when I want. But the right growth is, I agree, is like the most important thing. And so the word of mouth is my favorite way of growth, because I like my patients. And when they send me their friends, I know that they are the same type of people. I will like them, and it's all going to be great. And so it allows me to grow with the right families, and it keeps churn really low. And so I think the organic growth and also the autonomy, like I didn't have any patients scheduled Friday, blocked it off, going to take my son to the zoo. Mm-hmm. Like I just get to go do these things because I want to. I blocked off today and tomorrow for as much time as possible so I could watch some of the AAP conference. Like I get to just do what I want to do each day. Or sometimes I'll have days where I'm like, oh, God, I don't want to stay late. I don't want to like see patients. And so like I will move them to the next day. Like I just get to do what is best for me, and realizing that also I used to be scared to, whenever I was first open, to like ruffle any feathers or create any waves or whatever. And like, oh, hey, I got to move your appointment because something came up. And so I would do that. And I'd sacrifice like my personal well-being for the fear of rocking the boat and like scaring patients off. And now I'm like, they don't care. And I'd say another great win I had was I did a lot of pediatric COVID clinics. It was really hard to find COVID vaccines under 18 months. And I was like one of the only ones that had Moderna. So I did tons of COVID clinics. And shockingly, the first people through the doors for the COVID vaccine were doctors' kids. And it was a lot of discussion. I had tons of discussion with other family docs, internal medicine docs, pediatricians who were like, so how do you do this? And so at the very least, I got it in their head. Oh, and I guess, so a personal win, my New Year's resolution was to find my own doctor. I've never actually been to the doctor in my life, except to have kids. Like that's the only time I've ever seen a doctor. My OB, when I went in with my twin, she's like, when was your last PAP? And I was like, what is that? It's fine. Really, a really good patient. So that was like my New Year's resolution, is I was like, I need a PCP. I probably should get like labs and like be a patient. So did. And he is opening his own DPC at the beginning of next year because he was like, you're just happy. Yeah. And so he is transitioning to DPC and like went to the summit, all the stuff.
That's awesome.
Love it. And now on the opposite side of things, you guys had mentioned boundaries and you've mentioned ways that you have pivoted. But in terms of one of the biggest opportunities that you guys have found either to grow or to change your practice, can you give another example of what you've done over this past year?
So I changed EHRs. That was a huge, that was not enjoyable and it was expensive. But one of the things I realized was how many steps I had to take to do something and how many clicks it took and how many tabs I had to have open to like do all these things. And the final straw for me was I had been paying my EHR for 2 years to upload vaccines to the registry, which was a legal requirement. And I discovered they had not uploaded anything. So I have 2 years of vaccines that I am still going back through and inputting. So I am in compliance. Yeah. And I'm a VFC provider, a vaccines for children provider. So like I have to maintain VFC status. And they didn't do and it said submitted, completed submission to registry in my EHR. So like I never questioned it. Until so that was the final straw for me. So yeah, guys, double check that people are doing what you're paying them to do. But when I switched EHRs, it was awesome because my texts are in the chart, so I don't have to go through and copy and paste text into a note anymore. My fax automatically gets assigned to the patient, so I don't have to go through that, hey, I fax blah, blah, blah on this day. It's already in there. So then I don't have to go back through and like, what did I say in that letter? What did I say in that text? And it organizes my text by like group. So I'm like, okay, yes, this text session on this day because you were sick this day. And so it's all there. And it does all my billing and all this stuff. So it's everything is in one place, which has freed up my time. I did not realize how much time it took to go through and do all of these steps individually. And that was, I think, my biggest opportunity that I didn't anticipate, but was a great thing.
I think mine was, again, because I'm a micro practice and I do not envision myself having staff right now. I just push my limits with looking for workflow opportunities that make my life easier. I definitely have way more time for how much I make. The whole ratio of time spent versus how much you actually make because of membership model. The whole point is to be there for your patients when they need you, but that doesn't mean they need you all the time. So it just happens to be some patients using you a lot of times for the month versus then for many months they won't need you. So I just want to kind of remind about that because that makes my workflow important when they do need me. It's really quick stuff. I don't want to sit and type a bunch of things. So over the 2 years, every time I've repeated myself about something, I just created this nice little response. And I've used Macro, I think it's called Macros Pro or Macro Tips or something like that, which integrates with my keyboard. I did try text replacements, like you said, Marielle, but some of those, they need to be like really long responses, and I don't think they would fit into the text replacement that comes as a inbuilt within the iPhone. But my Macro Tips is really useful because if I send a prescription, or let's say the most common ones are prescription sent, checking in, did you get the lab order that I sent, and quick stuff like that I want to just check up on. All of that is within my keyboard, and so I just go click, whether it's in an email or a text or through my EMR. As long as it's in the keyboard, it just goes straight in, and I can just edit a few things like prescription is sent to this pharmacy and just write down the name of the pharmacy if they keep switching sometimes between pharmacies. And so it's so much easier. I felt like I've been on the go and managing not just like when I was flying back from Canada on a trip recently, and I had to order a CT scan because we did an X-ray and the patient was coughing out blood, and I really wanted to make sure there's no cavity or anything in the lung. And so went ahead, ordered a CT scan on the go from Seattle Airport because everything is set up on the laptop to just be click, and the fax went through. And so the experience that patients get is exceptional, but at the same time, I'm not beating my head about it. It's happening in a very convenient way on the go. And you know how much I've traveled the past year for various reasons, for fun and also for responsibilities. But I feel like it was possible because of those workflow managements that I did. And it might seem really simple, macros, but you won't imagine how many times you have to use them on various patients, because it's oftentimes lab testing or imaging or prescriptions, which is kind of the three tools in the surgeries I perform. Which is literally being internist. That's mostly what you need. Yeah, I think that was pretty much what I focused on this year, and has been incredible.
I definitely resonate with that, because oftentimes we don't really take note of exactly how much time a task takes until we do an inventory of it and say, oh, wow, it took me 15 minutes to send out this lab report, or whatever it is, or 45, it was really complicated, and things were all over the place and we got a whole bunch of labs. But honestly, using macros, whether it's for an exam or something to make it easier for scribing in the future, whether it's here's the common labs that I order and what they mean, and then I can just pull in exactly what the trend has been and thus what we're doing about it afterwards. The patient gets this really nice, very detailed report of what's going on from my perspective, and then we talk about future follow-up. One thing that really helps that we just kind of unlocked, I would say, within the past few months, is that instead of setting a reminder to ask the patient about the labs, we just schedule a text that says, hey, you're due for labs, and we put it 90 days, 180 days, whatever it is, in advance. And that way it's on the record. We are reaching out to them. We're saying, hey, if you want to go through insurance, just let me know. It's kind of like an auto text. So just say yes if you want me to put everything in the way it was before. And it makes things a lot simpler because the task list isn't building up and patients are still getting attended to and cared for. The final thing that has really helped, I think I may have alluded to this before, is that we make our communication policy as well as our what exactly patient care navigation through our operations assistant looks like. And so at the end of the visit, I say, okay, if we're putting in orders, prescriptions, anything like that, and you're having any trouble getting this through, here's the direct line for our patient care navigator. She will go on the hunt for whatever needs to be done. She'll report back to me, and you can always feed me into that as well, and I'll make sure that's taken care of. But the real most beneficial thing that I've seen so far was talking about the patient communication policy. And so it's a 30 or 60-second thing that I say to every single patient that's cut down on a lot of confusion, a lot of like afternoon texts and stuff. And so what I typically say is, so you may be wondering like how to get in contact with me. Here's my private card. It's got my private email and my private cell phone on it. There's no dial 6 for the call tree. There's no nurse line. It goes straight to me. And so if something's going on during the day and you have a concern, feel free to call, text, or email. I'll try to get through it in that business day. If you're concerned about it, certainly call and leave a voicemail. If I get that voicemail, I know you didn't butt dial me, so I know you want me to get back to you, and I can definitely make sure your resources are allocated appropriately, and we get that taken care of for you as soon as possible. If it's the case, we're open these hours to these hours on these days and these days. And then if it's the case that something's happening after hours and it's an emergency, of course, that's 911. If it's just, hey, my blood pressures are normal and things are going great, feel free to text or email me after hours. I will see those the next business day, make sure we get that attended to. And then if you're not sure, if you have a fever and abdominal pain, or you've got a cut and you're not sure where to go, definitely give me a call, because what I can do is make sure that that thing gets worked up appropriately. So for an example, if you go to the urgent care and you have this thing going on, the urgent care will see you, they will bill you, and then they will send you to the emergency room for that CT scan they don't have. If I know what's going on, I can make sure we marshal your resources appropriately and get you to the right spot. And then from there, I guess, while we're not legally, technically on call, I was raised the old-fashioned way. And so if something's going on with you and I happen to have my phone on me, I will make sure and like do everything I can to make sure you're cared for. Any questions on how to contact me? That 30 or 60 second or whatever it is has gone a long way for clearing up any potential opportunities for friction. And then when I know a patient texts me or emails me over the weekend, they're not expecting that to get followed up for. That's what the phone and being put on emergency bypass for their phone is for.
Awesome. And I'm sure that your tips have continued to help the people who are listening and tuning in and being inspired by your stories. Now, when we talk about our practices, there's always something that happens where you're talking to another physician, talking to a resident, talking to a medical student, or even a future patient. And you're like, you would never believe that this happened in my practice. And the only reason it happened was because I do direct primary care. So can you guys give examples of things that have happened over the past year where it's you wouldn't believe it if type of situation?
I think mine, the biggest one was a patient traveling internationally to get testing done in an affordable exact pricing before the patient went through all that. So she knew how much she would be spending on the flight, just like she knew how much she would be spending for the labs and my appointments. So I've heard of these things happen with like, oh, patient, fancy politician patient come to Mount Sinai for like some cutting edge therapy, but you wouldn't think there would be a patient coming for affordable and predictable care from Europe to San Diego on vacation and get testing done. So that was actually a really incredible thing, which I don't think in any insurance-based model I would have come across a patient look for me and come specifically for what I'm offering. And that's incredible. And it went through really great. And it just still is really, I would say a matter of pride, but it makes you really humble, because you then realize there's a lot of people who need this. There's so many countries who don't have access to care. And a lot of people ask DPC doctors, oh, but you don't work for free. Oh, then you're charging membership, right? You're not free. So why are you charging extra when I have insurance? Well, there's a lot of people who don't even have insurance, and I don't call myself like some sort of a messiah or something, right? But I think we have a role to play. There's a lot of uninsured patients in the community, and it's not all about the people who are insured.
Yeah, definitely. I can think of two examples that were really a credit to what DPC is able to do for patients. I think a lot of patients in general who come to DPC have had a really negative experience in the healthcare system. They've been very difficult time with care coordination, with getting the things that they need, and things just feel kind of left by the wayside. And so as a result, a lot of patients feel like they're trying to hold their entire health history and health maintenance on their own shoulders. And that's extremely anxiety producing. And so one of the things that we try to do is, if there's any way that that we can eliminate confusion, that we can coordinate care a little bit better, even if it's a little bit unconventional, we certainly will. I can actually think recently there was a patient my wife had, and she was having like a little bit of a miscommunication with like, what is the next best step for oncology for this particular thing? And it's kind of off the beaten tracks in terms of what the guidelines say. And we wanted to try something a little bit different. And so initially it wasn't clear based on the patient communication and like with the specialist that things were going to proceed the way we hoped. And so what Christina did was asked if it was okay to phone in and sit in on that oncology appointment. And it was just, thank goodness that she did that. I'll toot her horn a little bit, because the receiving specialist, for some reason, their EMR or whatever went down. And so they had no notes to go off of. They had no anything. And so she was able to provide that kind of sign out and give some ideas. And it ended up having a really good outcome for the patient. And speaking of things not working correctly, I actually had one recently where we kept sending an EMG order and it was going through. I could see it in the EMR. I sent it a million times. Our assistants were also working, coordinating, just it was not going through. We called, we sent it while calling, like so many different things. Eventually, we just said enough. And so my clinical assistant, she printed out the order and she hand delivered it to that office for two of our patients. And it's one of those things that wish we didn't have to do things like that. But unfortunately, the healthcare system is run on faxes and all these antiquated things. And so you got to do whatever's necessary to make sure your patients are getting the best possible care. And so those are some big wins that we've had recently, because it's so easy for things to get lost in the system. And part of DPC is ensuring that stuff doesn't happen.
So I've had a pretty medically complex patient that his mom was referred to me by her therapist. And I actually got a call from the therapist that was like, I want you to know that just by being a central person and advocating for him, like, she was like, I've never seen her succeed this much in therapy. And like, so that was like, just knowing that my ability to just send orders immediately, and like he needs constant home health nursing approvals and notes and changes and stuff. And she used to have to call and be like, hey, I need you to sign this. We run out on the 7th. Hey, I need you to sign this. And so she just doesn't have to do that anymore. So like things like that was really cool. And then I had one kid that, because I know him so well, saw him after he'd had a seizure, and they came to my house because it was Halloween. This was last year. It was Halloween. So they came to my house. They lived close by and they were already in the car. And so it's like, yeah, just come over. You don't need to go to the ER. I'll look at him. So like I have my home bag of stuff. So my kids were napping, so it worked out well. Like checked sugar, looked at him, did a neuro exam, was like, he's fine. This was probably just febrile seizure. So, but told him, was like, hey, this is what you watch out for. If he has another one in 24 hours, blah, blah. So I was like, you need to go to the ER. Had several more. And he had several more seizures and was seen in the ER, and they only consulted neuro. It was middle of the night, so they didn't come in. And then I called neurology on call, and it was I think it was like, I don't know who it was, but it was a fellow or resident. He was like, yeah, just start him on Keppra. And I was like, I don't start kids on Keppra. Like, that's not my thing. And so then I was very frustrated, and I know this kid's personality, and he was not acting right. I called the admitting attending, because I know her. And I was like, hey, something's wrong. Got a direct admit, and he was having frontal lobe seizures, like subclinical. And I think I'm like, okay, the fact that like I was able to have these calls, it was phone calls, right? You can do it from anywhere. I was like making my kids breakfast, and I was like I was getting him a direct admit. And like I was calling mom, they're like, hey, I was like texting her as I'm on the phone. I'm like, hey, I'm on the phone with neurology. I'm telling her the story. She's going to admit him. This is what you need to do. And just the level of like the expediency is incredible, but just the fact that like got him in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
All because of practicing as direct primary care physician.
Because I have the time that I knew this kid was not, and it wasn't mom was being crazy. He was not acting normal. I've known him for 2 years. He was not acting like himself.
And I just want to highlight again, because you are direct primary care physicians, and because you have a membership model and you're not being paid by number of heads seen per day, you got paid to do those things, because there's no code. I don't know what code to use to represent all of that work and that dedication and that tenacity that you guys show every day, and why people find your value proposition necessary. So on that note, I want to ask about pricing. Have your guys' pricing structures changed over the last year?
Yes, our pricing structure did change. Initially, the prices that we had were as a thank you to our inaugural members. And then as our practice began to grow, we really wanted to consider, okay, what are the features? What does our dream practice look like? What are the things that we want to be able to bring to the table to offer patients? And then how do we back calculate and make sure that that happens? And one of the things that we realized was it would be really great if we had like the best care coordination we could possibly have. And we realized that having assistants to help with logistical and clinical concerns would be able to do that for us. And so as we adjusted, what we were able to do is really focus more on hospitality. We were able to make sure that we have a well-compensated staff, a series of assistants who are bringing their A game every single day to work. And I wanted to make sure that they were sharing in that growth, that we were creating a place that would be a wonderful place to work. And so being compensated is part of that. And so I wanted to make sure that we build that team together. And so we had to think about it and decide, okay, exactly how do we want to make this work? We ended up going ahead and increasing our prices, and we had the same for children and adults. And we haven't looked back since. It's allowed us to provide a 5-star level of hospitality and coordination of care that we really wanted to make sure that we deliver so that we can feel good about the medicine that we're practicing. And so it's been great so far.
So there's pros and cons to changing the pricing. I feel like if there is some amount of churn, a few patients leaving each month, if you have a larger price, then every time a patient leaves, that's how much you'll drop on your income. So it does make sense to find that best fit where it works out for you to have that churn and still not be vulnerable with losing income. But at the same time, it should just be the right amount that you would make for seeing the same patients, same number of patients, or goal number of patients that you can actually handle perfectly, and while not compromising on the quality of care. So we know DPC is not incredibly scalable because it involves actual physician time. And so it just seems like, even though I had started off with a really low price, like I think some of my discount members in the beginning were like $35 a month, which is really incredible amount directly with a doctor for almost 90% of the care. And so it went from probably 7 patients having access to that to the youngest patients being $50 a month being the lowest price for the non-discount pricing. And then over the years now it's come to $129 a month and $159 a month. And the reason being, I feel like the amount of effort I put in and for the number of patients that I see, it is still very affordable for how much patients get. And I don't want to increase the price any further for the foreseeable future, just because of inflation and everything's expensive. Like even groceries are expensive. So I have to kind of factor in that for my own, the sustainability of my practice as well, because I don't want to be having all this progress and then going and finding a part-time job to just make this work. So it just seemed like the best fit to increase the price slightly. And patients actually, it's kind of weird. Patients actually take you more seriously when the pricing is a little more palatable with or comparable with the rest of how much an electrician would charge or a plumber would charge. And suddenly you don't seem like this far-fetched telemedicine company, and you actually become a legitimate person who you have a doctor-patient relationship with. So it did help, but it happened very naturally. I don't think I spent a whole lot of time thinking about the pricing. It just happened so that I felt like this price range was mostly the best fit for my practice as well.
And I know a lot of people have commented on this sort of thing before, but it is very much when somebody is a prospective patient and they're calling and trying to figure out if you're who you say you are and if you do what you say you do. And that conversation, it's built on trust. And so if you're offering a large value proposition, I want to make sure that's acknowledged. And at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm delivering everything possible for my patients. I have found that in our area, when you're talking about, so the counter argument is like, aren't we approaching concierge? Aren't we like doing something that somehow is counter to the DPC ethos? And what I would say is if you've seen one DPC, you've seen one DPC. There are so many different ways, whether it's focusing on old-fashioned doctoring to the cutting edge integrative this and that, or whether it's affordable versus premium. There's so many different ways that you can make your message resonate. And just briefly, like, especially when I was having this conversation with patients, sometimes there'd be a little bit of confusion because it's like, do you want to, they think it's like, okay, this is kind of like concierge, right? And then part of me as a DPC doctor and all the baggage that comes with what the word concierge means and these kinds of things. Before I used to say, oh, no, we're nothing like that. We're this thing and it's this new movement, like 1,500 or 1,600 practices and we're all independent and this and that. And really, I think that was actually a disservice to the message, because what they were asking by saying concierge was, are you accessible? That's what they meant. And so when I kind of removed my own baggage and said, yes, we're like concierge, except we don't bill insurance and we don't do the annual fee thing. They say, oh, okay, perfect. It's so few logical leaps to go from what they understood to what we do.
Yes.
Absolutely. That totally makes sense. And it ended up being, we didn't have to kind of pull them back from, they didn't have to retract it all during that conversation. We were able to say, yeah, let's go ahead and move forward with an appointment and talk more about this. And so that ended up being really useful, because some of the challenge here is making sure that people do appreciate and value what you do, that it's sustainable for you, but at the same time that when you have that conversation, it doesn't lead to any kind of shady like questions about, okay, well, how are you doing this? And how are you able to provide all of this? And people still feel that way, even with an increased price. Like, I'm still like so blown away that you can do X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of DPC physicians have gotten that feedback before. And so I'm still convinced and committed to the idea of an affordable membership and making sure that that makes sense for people and makes sense for me. But it also, again, it's allowed me to increase the quality. And that's what I've doubled down on, the hospitality. And that's what patients have come to really, truly appreciate.
I have raised prices. Yeah. like I'm worth more. And I think the typical mindset whenever you start is you're like, I need it low enough because I need people to join. I just need people to join. But I have found people are more intrigued whenever things are more expensive, because if it's too low, then they're like, are you a real doctor? And so, yeah. And I'm like, girl, yes. So, and there is some marketing thing that it's like, buyer FOMO or something. So if things are more expensive, then people find it more. Though I like go through, and I had some mom tell me that she had to pay $190 every time she saw her doctor.
Oh yeah, that's like $300 almost some places. And I have patients who have incredible insurance.
Yeah, Cadillac insurance.
Who still choose membership because the thyroid test needs to be done, let's say every 3 months or something until, and of course, if they get pregnant and stuff, more monitoring.
Yeah.
And they would rather not spend $300 on a tele appointment for the lab test to be ordered.
I do think that's like one of the biggest differences between myself and adult docs is uninsured is the abnormal for me. Kids are insured. Kids almost always have insurance. So and maybe that's Medicaid, but kids qualify for coverage, right? So I think I only have like 10 or less that are uninsured because they have health sharing. So all of my patients' families are like, yeah, I need to talk to someone whenever my kid, whether it's a teenager with depression or a 2-year-old with an illness, and they're like, I just need to talk to my doctor. So they realize the value.
Yeah. And I think that especially in our communities, especially for people who are opening where DPC is not a very common thing. Like you go to a neighborhood in Colorado and you might have multiple DPCs to choose from versus somewhere else where there's few. No matter where we are, the culture is definitely changing in that, like you guys have shared, the growth that you guys have experienced because people understand what you're bringing to the table and how it is absolutely different than a concierge practice in terms of we bill insurance and the annual fee. And it's very different from the fee-for-service practice that we were so ingrained to function in when we went to residency. So on that note, I want to ask about what the future holds. So in terms of going into this next year, how have you guys set goals? What are those goals? And what are the benchmarks that you're using to achieve those goals?
So we are trying to figure out, now that practice has grown significantly, where exactly is this going to lead? Are we going to see more and more patients and just keep growing as a mom and pop shop? Are we thinking about adding on more of a physician team and more people coming in and doing like a multi-specialty thing, or just all primary care? We're trying to figure all of that out right now. What I can tell you is that the guidepost that we're using is how we feel about the day. And so we kind of take at the end of each day, say, okay, this day was great, this X, Y, and Z happened. And then I review that every couple of months or so to really just do a pulse check and make sure that just because we're on the road to growth doesn't mean we need to continue this way. Each person could have like their own little micro practice and be super happy and everything's just fine there. So I can tell you that in terms of our goals right now, I know Christina is looking to have a smaller patient panel right now. We're still thinking about family stuff and being there for those really critical times. And that may change as children grow up and that kind of thing. But we wanted the freedom to be able to make that decision and make sure that we're still taking the best care of our patients. And so that's when we kind of always have a pulse on that. Are we like, where are we in terms of how we feel? Where are we in terms of how the practice is going? And then ultimately, I have a feeling what is going to happen in the coming months to coming year. What we're looking to do is add on either a pediatrician or a geriatrician to help the practice grow, but each person is still taking care of their small little panel, their small little corner of our community. And I'm very curious to see where that goes. Still an idea we're putting up in the air right now.
So I think in terms of goals, there's been a lot of extra room in the past year for me to like explore my personal situation, because you go through your residency and all this training like rapid fire, and you have no time for family. You're just literally just eating, working, maybe sleeping, and then eating, working. And so for the first year of starting My Happy Doctor, obviously I was busy with like just setting up and like learning how to even run a business and how to interact with patients, how to maintain that My Happy Doctor role. Like Jake said, hospitality. I mean, I think I want patients to feel like they're at Disneyland with My Happy Doctor. So if that was taking also a lot of my time, which is what actually happened, this year has been a little more extra time, just like spending time with family, figuring out what's next for family and me and all of those things. And I feel like the extra time that I got was not necessarily still enough to make up for those many years of putting life on a pause for training. So I think what I see myself doing is, obviously I will continue to find my happy place where I'm still balancing out work with life. I'm going to start new hobbies like pottery. I want to work with my hands and do some pottery, and also want to learn digital art. So I'm all interested about like the lighting that comes in all those pictures with cartoons in them. Like, how do you get lighting on cartoons? Like, that's incredible to me. So I have all these courses that I have planned for. So there's so much more personal growth that I foresee happening in the future, which I know is not necessarily what my happy doctors professional growth might be, but that's going to make me a better person. That's going to make me help my patients who are anxious feel less overwhelmed, because I'm having the extra time to focus on my own well-being, which is often underestimated. They expect doctors to be like robots, right? Most of the healthcare system literally just chop, 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 chop. And nobody actually cares to live the simple life anymore. Doctors want to live the simple life, I guess, but they just don't have the opportunity. I wish DPC becomes predominant. That's what I want to see, even though it's not my goal for my happy doctor. That's eventually going to be the goal of my existence, so to say, right? Like, I want there to be many, many more my happy doctors. Even though the micro practice is my goal with my practice, I'm pretty much really happy with what I've achieved here, but there's so much more to do so that medical students and residents internationally even have an opportunity to think about this type of model, because we see all these successes. We're just hearing from just only 3 doctors today, and it's been incredible. Right. Just 2 years of practice, and we are seeing so much impact in the community. I really, really, really hope. I mean, that's my goal, whether it's for 1 year or for like 70 years, I don't care. If it takes that long to put the word out that corporate, large, scalable, income generating, middlemen filled communities, they really have to be replaced with the good old, simple, straightforward, but high tech and really high quality healthcare from the ground up, like grassroots level. So we don't ever have to say, oh, I couldn't get an appointment with my doctor for 3 months, which is literally what we hear every day.
Yep. And it's so interesting for you to say that, and also highlight the impact that could be made even in international students, because like both of your parents are physicians in India, and you've told me how amazed they are. They're like, how did we end up practicing the way we did for years? And our daughter is thriving, practicing where she can focus on, I want to learn pottery next year. That's amazing.
Right? Yeah, I think DPC, I'm really, really grateful that I stumbled upon DPC. One thing that I mean, you know how social media is, it can have its pros and cons and like huge impact in both positive and negative ways. But I think no matter how much I want to believe that DPC just fell in my lap, it didn't. There was a huge, huge, huge role of social media, because we are literally all over the place. I have never met you, Marielle, but all this wouldn't have been possible, right? If we hadn't found a platform to be communicating with each other.
Absolutely. And Lauren, how about you in terms of what the next year holds? What are your goals and what are your benchmarks to achieve those goals?
My goal would be to find another pediatrician. That's my big goal. Because I've been in survival mode for so long of just like, I need to get this up and running. Now I'm profitable. Okay. Now I need to actually make a salary. Okay. Like now I need to find, so I've just been in like the day to day that my husband was like, what's your 5-year plan? Like, what's your 10-year plan? Like, you need to be thinking longevity. And he was like, do you want to do this every day? Like, if you do, great, stop. But if you don't, like, you need to start figuring this out. What do you want this to look like? And so my big goal for this next year is to like come up with a long-term plan. Like, how do I want to be practicing when I'm 50? I need to be thinking about that. And so finding another pediatrician that will do this, which I would rather wait forever for the right doctor, because I want someone who practices similar to me. I want there to always be a consistent message coming from my practice. I want there to not be someone that is not like, I have been growing in like my LGBTQ kids, and like, and I need someone that is like trans affirming and doesn't think that it's weird or whatever. I need people that are like on the same page as me. And so I will wait, and as long as that takes, to find that person. But my goal would be to find them in a few months, because I also don't want to lose the momentum that I have with this practice and the amount of interest I have. And I'm finally getting around to like be popular enough and like, and trustworthy enough with other physicians that like OBs are recommending patients to me, and family docs are recommending patients to me. And so the fact that I have this momentum built up and this brand built up, that I have to maintain it, but I also don't want to lose that. So I want to find someone quickly. And the other thing I'm gonna have to do in the next year is figure out what I want to do location wise. If I want to stay in this location, if I want to move closer to my home.
And just for context there, how far is your location from your home, and what are the ideal things that you would like to see if you were to move to a different location?
Oh, so I'm 15 minutes from my house, which is not bad. But when you have kids, to see a patient, it takes an hour. And your house can get destroyed in an hour. So it just makes it hard to run and do things, because I'm like, oh God, like it's going to actually take a significant amount of time. So I would like to be closer to my house. As far as location, so I have therapists that share I have 2 exam rooms built, and I have 2 therapists that share my second room, which I love, and I don't want to not have that, but I'll have to build out another one. So then that's what I also need to figure out, is like, what exactly do I want? Well, I'd like my rent to be cheaper, because right now it's like 50 grand a year. And so I would like cheaper rent, but that is just not going to be possible, because we live in a very we live in Kansas City, like we live in the metro. It's going to be expensive, but I would want to find something close. And then just things I hadn't thought about, like I need good parking. I need stroller accessibility. I need all these different things that I had never thought about before. So yeah, it's just things that like I've also realized like how important it is. Like I have great work neighbors. They're so wonderful. They'll text me and be like, oh, you got this package. It looks pretty important. And like send me pictures. They're just, oh, they're so great. And so I don't want to live next to I don't want to work next to like a turd. So I don't know.
Spoken like a true pediatrician. It's just like saying the word potty instead of toilet or restroom, and people are like,
someone they had booger energy.
You all have been mentors for medical students, residents, other physicians. What closing words would you like to part with for this year's interview in terms of advice or things to look out for in the future?
I would say that advice-wise, there are a couple of things that I frequently tell third-year medical students who come rotate, who are thinking about family medicine, but they don't know if they want to really dive into it. The advice typically revolves around, don't try to look for the specialty. Figure out people who are doing the thing that you like to do, and then ask them how they got where they are. Because medical students are starting to see, oh, this is what life feels like for somebody who's in a DPC practice. And they say, I can do that. And so the whole climate of what healthcare is going to look like, to your point, Deepti, is it's going to be something that happens, I think, 1 third year or 4th year medical student at a time. Once they can see what it means to give the kind of care that we as a community are trying to provide, once they can see how that fits into their own lives, once they can see what it looks like for someone else to practice that, a light turns on and they say, you know what, I can do this.
I think mine is similar to that, but in reverse. Like I'm always like, figure out what you don't like. You don't like surgery. You don't like being sterile. Okay, surgery's not for you. You don't like, because that was like, I think the most helpful thing for me is like, I hated chasing INRs. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do adult. So like that, something like that I know it's so fun. So I like figuring out what you don't like. Like I didn't want to do adult genitalia. All right, urology's out. Podiatry, like all that stuff. So you figure out what you don't like, which then will lead you to what you like. Or figure out like what my personality would not go well with with adult medicine. Like just straight up would not be successful. So figuring out what kind of person you are too, that it's like, are you a shy and reserved human being that doesn't like having conversations? And maybe primary care isn't what you need to do, but are you this outgoing, you love to talk to people, you love to be engaged and you love figuring things out? Well, like radiology probably isn't for you. So it's figuring out one, what your values are and what your personality type is, and then what you don't like. And then you can start figuring out, once you know what specialty you do enjoy, because you've ruled out the other ones, then you can start like sussing out, what do you enjoy about that specific practice? Do you like the academia part? Do you like the research part? Okay, then maybe you need to go into the big hospitals and go into academia. Do you like, what is it that you want and what do you value? And then you find something that matches that, because I think so many of us like think that we have to change what we are to mold into a specialty, versus you can find any type of specialty or whatever that you brings you joy and brings you light or whatever, and then make it match to you.
Yeah, I think Lauren, you just nailed it. Like there's the aspect of finding the specialty, and then there's the aspect of what kind of setting you want to work in, academia, research, all those things. And the only thing I want to add is these things evolve with time, and you may just explore new things. And I started off thinking I want to be a surgeon. Now look, I want to do pottery, right? Like it's you want to do something with your hands, maybe you decide not to do surgery down the road sometime. And then you also kind of explore the various, especially during residency, there's so many different options and opportunities. But I feel like at second year, it helped that I nailed the part where I wanted to at least decide if I want to do outpatient or inpatient or ICU or specialize further, or specialize further in outpatient, or specialize further as a hospital focused or critical care focused doctor. The reason, or procedural, the reason being, you can choose a bunch of elective rotations that are focused on what you like and enjoy. Like I did a bunch of ortho, sleep medicine, endocrine, rheumatology, because I knew I was focused on outpatient, and that's pretty much the bulk of the care you provide. Cardiology, endocrine is literally what you end up doing. So it helps to, at least through medical school and all of that, obviously you have your dreams, and just like Lauren said, you want to weed out stuff you don't enjoy doing, and then like Jake said, you want to focus on what you enjoy doing, and then kind of build on top of it by just seeing a successful person who's happy in their life doing whatever they're doing, and then get back to basically go back down their path of how they achieved it and what steps they took. But the evolution, I'm not kidding you, things I know people who have already worked for as faculty or already worked at private practice for 8 years and are still figuring out what they like and what they enjoy. So it's never too late. It's like you can start when you're 60, you can be like, I want to do this, right? It doesn't matter. It's all about that present moment where whatever you feel is completely valid, and you should just follow doing.
Something I will add that to the residents is that something that I did that I'm so glad I did was I took a ton of specialty electives. I didn't do a bunch of primary care electives. I did primary care in my continuity clinic. I knew how to do primary care. So I chose specifically electives that I was bad at. I did a lot of renal. I did a lot of cardiology or whatever. And so then when I was with them, I'd be like, okay, what are you comfortable with a primary care doc managing? What annoys you as a referral? What do you think is an essential referral? And then I would go through and I kept a Word doc or a Google doc of like, okay, these are the things that I can do on this. And in neurology, I was like, I'm going to be a solo PCP. I need to learn a really good neurology exam. So it's putting your own pride of like, oh, I can do a neuro exam, but like, no, I wanted to learn from the best neurologist in the state. What is your neurology exam, and teach it to me. And when I was in cardiology, I was like, I need you to grill me on EKGs and heart sounds. Like I have to know these things because it's just going to be me. And I think I am really glad I did that. And I also got a ton of cell phone numbers. So I have specialists that I'm like, Like I have one today that I'm like, hey, I have an undescended testicle in a 1-year-old. Do you want me to get an ultrasound before I send him over? And he's like, yeah, I'll get him in next week. So I can just have this level of care. So get phone numbers, residents, but also like, don't do electives that you're good at. Do the one you're not good at.
Yeah. Which is part of like the specialty you choose or whatever you
Yes.
end up.
Yeah. If you're going to do DPC primary care,
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
Exactly. You don't have to do the stuff you hate, but what you find a little bit hard, because there's a clear distinction between those
Yes.
and those two. Yeah, that's awesome.
And just to add to that, one of the things that we did while we had some like management and family office elective time, I don't know if we ever mentioned this, was we would spend some time in the phlebotomy clinic. And so we would learn a couple of those like accessory skills because, hey, if we're going solo, it might be a good idea to have that on board. And so little things like that can be really helpful when bringing your practice together, because all of a sudden it decreases the barrier that you have to surmount in order to provide full-scale services.
Yeah. I did that with our nurses. I became good friends with them and I was like, teach me how to place an IV. And I just would spend my nights sitting and placing IVs in them. And then in the ER, I'd be like, hey, anytime I order labs, will you let me draw them? In my continuity clinic, I started giving my patients their vaccine so I could, because I knew I was going to have to do these things. And doing those accessory things that you don't think about because they just happen is important.
So again, guys, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this last year of your guys' practices.
Thanks, America. Always happy to join this awesome team and chat about stuff.